So we're back with two of our insiders reporters. Valerie, so you're back from Italy. Tell us, Salvini's score, is it mainly or entirely due to a very strong anti-immigrant sentiment, or is there more to it, namely the economy?
Well, the anti-immigrant sentiment has, of course, been a very strong component, but it's indeed not the only one. On immigration, many Salvini supporters have told us that it's not so much the immigrants they're angry about, but the way politicians, whether at the national or European level, have dealt with them. They feel that Italy has been, taking much more of its share of the burden and got nothing in exchange. And this was quite clear in Lampedusa. People are saying the island lacks infrastructure, jobs are lacking, and they say they want no more. So Salvini's motto, Italy first, and his promises, for instance, to reduce taxes were very appealing to many of the League supporters. Mm-hmm.
But is it fair to say that Italy's economic problems predate the influx of migrants?
Absolutely. Italy has gone through a very severe financial crisis, as the rest of Europe, and in particular the south of Europe. Mm-hmm. So the economic arguments are essential, and people are saying that Salvini now is the only one they can trust, because all others have failed to, fulfill their promises.
Okay, talking about Southern Europe, you were in Spain earlier this year for Insiders. You reported on the rise of Vox, the far-right party. Mm-hmm. They didn't score so well in this European election. What's your take on that?
Well, it's true that they didn't fare as well at the national and European elections as they did at the regional elections in Andalusia last winter. And observers tell us that one of the reasons is probably that this party is quite young. It's not, very well structured yet, not very well organized, hasn't had time to build a real, political campaigning machine. So that's one of the reasons. And then another one might be that some of its supporters, who are, defectors from the mainstream parties, were a little deterred by some of its more radical views, particularly on gender issues. They're very sexist. So this might have been dissuasive.
Okay. Well, thank you, Valerie. Let's talk to Damon. So, Damon, you were in Poland for Insiders. You also traveled throughout Europe for Euronews. Back to Poland, the Law and Justice Party did score really well in the election, the European election. You were expecting that, weren't you?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the PIS party, as they're known in Poland, has had a strong following for some time now, and they very much painted the EU elections as a battle against liberal ideals in the West, a threat to a Polish traditional way of life. Poland, of course, is a very staunch Catholic country, so the PIS has kind of won support around that, and things like immigration has also been a big issue in Poland. The government is very much anti-immigrant, can we say, and people that I spoke to in Poland were saying, well, yeah, we're not so much against immigrants, but we've seen the uncontrolled flow of immigration in other countries. We don't want that here. People fear what might come. PIS did well in the EU elections, but also an opposition coalition did fairly well too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are national elections coming up later this year, so the stage is set for that. Let's see what happens.
Okay, well, now this green wave during the European election, do you think it's likely to be further reflected in national polls?
Well, it was quite some gains that the Greens got in these EU elections this time around in places like France, Germany, the UK, Finland. Quite significant gains for them. Why has it happened? Well, there could be many different reasons. Maybe people are fed up with the populist, nationalist politics that we've seen rise over Europe over recent years. Or maybe it could be because of the things like climate change that we've seen a lot of pressure, a lot of campaigning going on around, because Swedish schoolgirl Greta Thunberg, for example, has motivated a lot of young people to take to the streets over climate change. Some of the analysis of the EU election results show young people are voting for the Greens. Whether the Greens will get in power in national elections, well, maybe that's not certain right now, but certainly they could get into some coalitions. So I think those traditional politicians in some of Europe's countries may be a little bit worried right now.
Mm-hmm. Valerie, back to you briefly. Do you think also the far right, the strengthening of the far right, is likely to be also reflected in national polls? I'm thinking of France, Italy, Do you think it's likely to be the case as well in national polls?
Well, part of the answer will also depend on the way the mainstream parties, address the messages that voters have clearly sent them. It's likely that some of the parties will try to take on board some of the far-right ideas, as we've seen in Hungary or Poland. And even if the far-right parties per se do not fare as well, or do not perform so well, they will no doubt have political representation one way or another. And let's not forget that they, doubled their score at the European Parliament. They now have 10% of MEPs against 5% 4 years ago.
Well, wait and see. But we know European elections are often a sounding board, right?
Indeed.
For trends
it's an interesting
in Europe.
time for politics
Absolutely.
in Europe right now.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks for watching. We'll be back soon.